Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today, we're going to completely flip everything you thought you knew about courage and action right on its head. You know how we usually think of courage as a prerequisite? Like it's some sort of permission slip you gotta have in your pocket before you can do anything brave? Well, what if we've had the order wrong this entire time? What if actually taking the leap is the very thing that builds the net?
Take this quote from Norman Vincent Peale. At first glance, it sounds almost like a trick, right? He says, act as if you were not afraid, and you will become courageous. It completely reverses our assumed order of operations. Peale is basically telling us that courage isn't the starting line at all. It's a lagging indicator. You do the action first, and then the feeling of courage, that shows up later, sometimes disguised as just a daily habit.
Section 1. The courage that comes second. All right, let's dive right into this idea of discipline as a transactional exchange because, honestly, it sets the foundation for literally everything else we're going to cover today.
William Arthur Ward absolutely nails this transaction. He points out that the price of excellence is discipline, while the cost of mediocrity is disappointment. Think of it like paying a bill. You've got to pay up front with your behavior and your actions. You do not get the payout, that feeling of being courageous or having strong character, until much later. The feeling is famously late to the party. You just have to put the work in first.
Section 2. Breaking invisible ceilings. So, once you really grasp this act first transaction, it starts shattering limitations all around you. And I mean, limitations you probably didn't even realize were entirely self-imposed.
You see, most of the ceilings we're living under aren't physical at all. They're really just permissions we haven't given ourselves to achieve something that the laws of physics already totally allow. It's not that the task itself is impossible, it's just that we're sitting around waiting for that magical feeling of readiness before we actually try. Let me give you a pretty stunning example of this from the sports world.
59. That's the magic number. Before 1977, literally no one had ever shot a 59 in a PGA Tour event. And it wasn't physically impossible. The clubs, the swing mechanics, the math, it all allowed for it. People just didn't expect to do it. Then Al Geiberger steps onto the course on this scorching, miserable day in Memphis. The guy felt sick. He absolutely wasn't aiming for the history books. He was honestly just hoping to survive the round. And guess what? He shot a 59.
Now, what's really fascinating about this achievement is the equipment he used. As author Os Hillman puts it, Geiberger pulled this off using old persimmon woods, clubs with the forgiveness of a butter knife. I mean, no way, right? He didn't have perfect conditions, he didn't have grand expectations or some high-tech gear. He just kept acting, kept swinging the club, and broke a ceiling that was never actually load-bearing to begin with.
We actually see this exact same mechanism play out in spiritual history too. Hillman points out that Jesus' disciples received a promise of power that they fundamentally did not understand. They had zero framework for binding, loosing, or doing miracles. But here's the kicker. They didn't wait until they understood it all before taking action. They stepped forward, acted as if that ceiling simply wasn't there, and their capacity actually arrived before their comprehension. The understanding caught up to them later.
So how does this translate into our professional lives? Well, author Robert Greene takes Peale's formula and applies it directly to leadership. If leaders just wait around, their authority calcifies and they become relics. Instead, Greene says you've got to act like a student, stay sensitive to the room, notice the moods behind people's words, and basically act your way into renewed relevance. Think about legends like Picasso or Chanel. They didn't wait around to feel inspired. They acted like eager students of their craft, long after they could have just coasted on their reputations.
But hold on a second. Section 3, the danger of living later. Because if we spend our entire lives just acting first, constantly pushing forward and trying to smash through invisible ceilings, aren't we kind of missing something crucial? Let's sharply pivot to a totally different idea for a minute.
We run into this really fascinating tension here, and this brilliantly illustrates it. George Raveling defines success as getting what you want, but happiness as wanting what you get. Think about that. If we're just endlessly drifting in a sea of wishing and grinding for that next big breakthrough, we completely lose our anchor in the present moment.
Garrison Keillor calls this exact trap the danger of living later. So I really want you to ask yourself, are you treating your ordinary life like it's just a waiting room? Are you the kind of person who's always, just one milestone away from actually living? Do you keep postponing the nice dinner, the evening walk, or just a simple conversation because you're waiting for some grand future arrival that might never actually happen?
We really have to correct where we're locating the prize of life. Anthony DeMello tells this great story about a student who asked a master how to become a great man. And the master's response completely flips the script. He says, "Why be a great man?
Being a man is a great enough achievement. DeMello is totally dismantling that underlying assumption that the real prize is strictly reserved for some future hyper-successful version of yourself. Your ordinary life right now, it is not a waiting room.
So how in the world do we resolve this tension? Welcome to Section 4, the unglamorous daily discipline. Because how do you break ceilings while also entirely accepting the present moment? The secret is, they aren't opposites at all. They actually live in the exact same practice.
Ryan Holiday explores this beautifully by looking at thinkers like Epictetus and Socrates. Socrates actually took delight in quiet, daily, almost boring improvement. I'm not talking about massive, flashy, yearly reinventions here, just daily, unglamorous reps. It's the exact same vibe with Wim Hof's practice of voluntary discomfort or Earl Nightingale's observation that when your days feel short and totally absorbed, that's when you're living at your best. This quiet daily work is what prevents the slow decline of a person or a company that just quietly stops trying. The unglamorous reps are literally what build your life.
Because the alternative is complacency. As Coach Dan John so dryly warns, in training everything works for about 6 weeks. The very second you hit a plateau, or the moment you mistakenly assume the hard work is finally finished just because you broke a ceiling once, that is the exact moment you begin to decline. So the daily work and the daily contentment, they aren't in conflict at all. They're the exact same practice, just looked at from 2 different angles.
Which brings us to Section 5, Seeing Potential, Trusting the Process. Let's take a second to ground this entire philosophical framework in our relationships with other people, because this daily discipline doesn't just apply to us in a vacuum.
This is where Viktor Frankl's incredibly profound definition of love comes in. Frankl says love is a way of seeing that perceives another person's unactualized potential, and by that very act of perception makes it real. George Eliot referred to things like this as unhistoric acts. It's like that one coach or that one teacher who completely changes the trajectory of your life simply by being present and seeing what you're capable of before you could even see it yourself. They act as if the potential is already there, and through that, it actually becomes real.
But we also have to be honest and acknowledge that sometimes this process requires profound trust without any kind of closure. Tony Dungy reflects on the sudden passing of his friend Keely McGregor at just 48 years old. And look, there is no neat, tidy, ceiling-breaking lesson there. Instead, Dungy points out that some disciplines require you to trust a process whose ending you are never going to get to see. Sometimes life just doesn't resolve into nice, tidy insights. Sometimes it just requires pure faith.
And as we bring this whole explainer beautifully back down to earth, just look at Lou Holtz's incredibly simple, repeatable rules for conduct. Do right, do your best, treat everybody the way you want to be treated. It sounds so basic, right? But there is immense power in raising your words rather than raising your voice. It's about influence through steadiness, not volume. Just showing up every single day and doing that quiet, unglamorous work.
Which brings us right back full circle to our opening promise from Norman Vincent Peale. Discipline is almost never announced by a matching feeling of readiness. Al Geiberger certainly didn't feel like a record breaker when he woke up. The disciples didn't feel ready at all. The courage, the friendship, the success, all of it comes second. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. What will acting as if today make true for you tomorrow? Stop waiting around for the feeling. Act first.